So using the image on the screen, we're going to create this one in AutoCAD using parametric drafting. The reason I'm going to use parametric drafting is because I have very limited dimensions on this, but there are some properties on it that we're going to use, and we can use that to create, well, basically put this object in rotation and things of that nature. I usually like to challenge people to try to do this one without watching the video first. And I'll tell you this, a lot of people will get close, but usually they can't get either the 63 or the 78.75 number to come out exactly right. So let's go ahead and jump on over to AutoCAD and start creating this one. Alright, so I'm going to start with a rectangle. And I'm just going to make that rectangle any size I want. So I'm just clicking 2 points. Then I'm going to rotate this rectangle just a little bit for me. I'll pick a base point here, and I want that to rotate that way. And we can use the mirror command, or we can use copy, or however you want to do it. I'll just mirror this. And I want to put it on the other side here. Now I want this line to go straight down. So I'm going to turn the ortho on, just to lock it in that position. Okay, so now that I have these two rectangles, let's go ahead and switch to parametric drafting. So if we remember some of our rules, that when we create a rectangle, we know that these corners are perpendicular to each other, and we have these lines that are parallel to each other. Well, a lot of those constraints are located here. So for example, if I wanted to make this corner and make sure that it always stays perpendicular, I'll select that icon, I'll select this line, and then this line. And now I'm going to get a little perpendicular icon there. I can delete that icon, and then that's going to break that constraint that we have on it. I'll keep going around, and I'll make a parallel here. I'll do the same here at the bottom. And now if I try to do this one, it should give me an error message because all of the others are perpendicular. So trying to force that one, it will over constrain it. So and that's why I get the error message here. Let's go ahead and do the same on the other side. So let's go ahead and apply all our perpendiculars. You could have also done this with parallel lines. I could have made sure that these two lines were parallel and these two were parallel. In this case, I chose to make them perpendicular. Remember, you can hit the enter button if you don't want to go back up to the top and keep selecting perpendicular. Okay, so now that I have these in line with each other, let's go ahead and create a line. And once again, that line don't have to be any distance in particular. Just make a line. Switch back to parametric. I'm going to lock a dimension on this line, so I'm going to lock this linear. And remember, I can select two endpoints, or I can select the object. So I think I'll hit the enter button, and I'm just going to select the whole entire object. I'll go and place that. Once you place the dimension, you'll get an option to change the distance. Let's make this the 78.75. Okay. Now I'm going to lock one of these corners just to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. And the way I can do that is I can use the lock icon. Then I can lock that endpoint. So now what I just told AutoCAD to do was make sure that that endpoint doesn't move. If I select on this line just with the grips, and I move this one, you'll see that I'm able to move that line up and down, but that end will not go anywhere. Even if I hit the enter button to try to move it, that will stay still. I also want to make sure that this line stays horizontal. So I'll select the horizontal icon and then make this line horizontal. So I have a fixed point at this end point, and this line will stay horizontal and the distance is locked. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is put this endpoint at that location. I'm going to use this with the coincidence icon. I'll use this endpoint and go to that endpoint. I'll do the same on the other end. So I'll use coincidence. I'll make this endpoint go to that endpoint. Okay, so now that we have our rectangles locked into position, we have our distance set, and I can see now that my distance is actually incorrect here. But don't worry, I can go back and delete that. So it's going to be a placeholder for right now. Let's use the align dimension. And then I'll select this endpoint to that endpoint. I'll place it somewhere on the inside of my rectangle, and I'll tell it that I want that thickness to stay at 2. Let's repeat that step on the other side. So I'll put one at that endpoint, one at this endpoint, and I'll come down and place this dimension and put it at 2. Let's go ahead and draw a line from this endpoint to this endpoint. Now I could have put that line anywhere, and I can still move this line if you want to see. I can select this grip and move it here. That's probably a good idea to move it, just so we can make sure that our constraints are acting correctly. So now when I put a constraint, a coincidence, from this endpoint to this endpoint, you'll see that this will snap up to that height. Let's do it for the other side. A coincidence between this endpoint and this endpoint. Now I have to make this line horizontal by selecting the horizontal constraint, and everything is in line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a middle line here just to tie these two middle lines, or the midpoints of these two lines, together. So if I create a vertical line, and once again the distance doesn't matter, then I'll move it to its position by using coincidence and say that this endpoint goes to that midpoint. Let's do it again for the bottom. This endpoint goes to that endpoint. And then we'll apply a vertical constraint to it. Okay, so now you can see my shape is able to be manipulated if I grab this grip. So I'm just going to left click and drag it. And you can see that as I move this in, the other one should move in as well. Let's go ahead and delete this one at the bottom. And I accidentally have my grip still selected. I'm going to undo this command. By using the undo, hit escape twice, make sure that this line here is not selected, and then I'll just only delete the bottom dimension. Now let's go ahead and put our linear dimensions on. So linear from this endpoint to this endpoint. Once I place that dimension, I'll be able to type in the distance, which is 78.75. And let's do a linear dimension at the top. I'll hit the enter button so I can select the object, come up and place it, and now this dimension is at 63. So this is parametric drafting. You're going to see that a lot of this when you're using any type of your 3D programs, and these constraints will look very similar if you plan on using the Autodesk version of 3D, which is Inventor. Okay, you have all these icons that are lit on here and you want to hide them. You have the option to show and hide them. So if I wanted to hide all of the icons and then hide the dimensions, now you can see that it looks like I just drew this regularly in AutoCAD. Now if I tried to move this, remember that I have a lock constraint on this. So no matter what I do, it's locking it in that position. And I'll show you with the move command. If I select move, select an object, pick a base point, you can see that that object will not go anywhere. If you want this object to move, choose Parametric, go ahead and show all of them, and then the one that has the lock on it, select it, right click, and then delete it. Now I'm able to move this object anywhere I want to put it in a title block. Let's go ahead and insert in our title block, and we'll use an A size for this one. So I'm going to use Classic Insert. Browse to my location, my A size title block. Once again, make sure nothing is checked. OK, and it should put it at 0, 0. Now I'll determine what scale I have by adjusting the title block height. So select your title block, do a right click, and choose Properties. In the Scale X and Scale Y, I'll make them both 4. It still looks like I'm a little smaller, so let's go ahead and make them 8. There are very minimum dimensions on this one, so let's go ahead and move this. And it looks like 8 might still be a little bit small for this drawing. I think I'll adjust the title block and make it a little bit bigger. So let's go ahead and select it. And this is one of them that will not fit in our traditional numbers. So let's go ahead and make each one of these 10. If this was a metric drawing, I would be able to put 1 to 10. So determine on what type of measurements that you're using or what type of units. That's going to determine what your scale is. Let's go ahead and move this one up a little bit more now. Okay, so we're going to do this one using the annotation option. So where I have decimal, I'm going to slide over to I have the 1:1, select the fly up, and then select 1 to 10. Do a regen, and I'm just typing in RE, and now you'll see your line type should appear. On this one, we don't have any center lines or center marks, so we can bypass that step. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and set up our dimension style. Underneath the annotation option, I'll just select the down arrow, or like I said before, it's a lot easier to type in D enter, and it will bring up the same dialog box. Let's double click on the annotative and make sure that our current dimension style says annotative. Let's go to modify. We don't have to worry about center marks again, so the symbols and arrows tab we don't have to do anything with. The text one, let's go ahead and leave our text big for this one. So we're going to leave it at 0.18. Underneath the fit, remember that we're using annotative, so we don't have to worry about adjusting the scale. Our primary units, we have 3 decimal places. So let's make sure we're on 3. And we do have the trailing zeros that are showing up. Let's go ahead and select OK, then close. I'll select the drop down here and choose dimensions to make sure my dimensions come on the right layer. Choose linear, this endpoint to this endpoint. And once I place my dimension, you can see that it does read to 63. Let me go ahead and turn my constraints off. I'm in Parametric. Just tell them to hide them. Okay, let's go back and do our linear dimension, so the height of this. And I don't think we went and set our height when we did it in our parametric drafting. So when I click and place this one is at a different height. Let's go over to Parametric. I'll choose Linear. Hit the Enter button because I'm going to select an object. Select this line, drag to the left, and place it. And then I'll type in the height, which is 13.625. Okay, so that's reading correctly. And it looks like my dimension jumped off of where its location was, so I'll go ahead and fix that. So let's go ahead and go to Hide All. Let's just go ahead and place a new dimension on it. So I'll just place it with a linear dimension from here to here, and that'll read correctly. Let's do a linear dimension at the bottom from this outside endpoint to this endpoint. And for our one that's reading the thickness, you have to use a align dimension. I'll hit the enter button and then select this line here at the bottom and place it. Remember that you can select this dimension and turn off the extension lines. So I'll turn both of them off. And while I have the text over, I'll go to the override, less than, greater than, space, and then I'll type in THK. Once you hit enter, it should be on there. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in our title block. Select your title block. Scale is 1:10. Project. It's going to be parametric. Okay. So this is one of those things that if you're caught somewhere with minimum dimensions, you are able to manipulate it based off of those dimensions to create the shape or part that you're trying to achieve. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed watching this one, and I'll see you on the next one.